He never imagined he was a father until the day his ex called, and he laid eyes on the child himself. The hospital room was sterile and cold, filled with the steady hum of machines and the faint rhythm of hurried footsteps in the corridor. Alexandra Blake rested motionless in the narrow bed, her body frail and stitched with pain. She had been trapped there for 3 long months, 7 days of 4 drips, transfusions, endless medication, and blurred sunrises. Complications during childbirth had nearly stolen her life. The delivery was sudden. Violent waves of pain and panic pulling her into darkness before she ever had the chance to hold her baby boy. When she finally opened her eyes, her entire world had shifted forever. She was a mother now, though the first glimpse of her son, Logan, came through the glass of an incubator. Thankfully, Logan was healthy, born a little early, but strong. With his dark tufts of hair and piercing ocean blue eyes, he carried the undeniable reflection of someone Alexandra once knew too well. Cole Hatcher. She hadn't spoken his name in months, not since the day she walked away. Cole had never known she was pregnant. She chose silence, convinced that revealing the truth would only end in rejection or regret. She remembered his words too clearly. Children were a burden, a distraction from ambition. He hadn't said them with cruelty, but they cut deep, lodging under her skin like shards of glass. So she left, quietly, carrying a secret that grew heavier with every heartbeat. Nothing, however, had prepared her for what followed. Within hours of birth, the hemorrhaging began. Emergency surgery, blood loss, days drifting in and out of consciousness. And when the physical suffering started to fade, the loneliness took over. Alexandra had no family, her parents gone, no siblings nearby. Friends came at first, then drifted away as weeks turned into months. Nurses were kind, but they weren't shoulders to cry on when the nights grew unbearable. She was utterly alone except for Logan. Each morning the nurse placed him in her arms, and each night they carried him back. Alexandra lived for those hours in between. She tried not to think of Cole, but every time Logan opened his eyes, the same piercing blue as his father's, memories came rushing back: his laughter, his determination, the way he held her as though she was the only softness in his hard-edged life. She remembered, too, the constant shadow of inadequacy, the feeling she'd never quite belong in the world he built. Leaving had felt like the only way to protect their son from being yet another thing Cole didn't have time for. But now, staring at the pale ceiling, her strength nearly gone, Alexandra reached for the hospital phone. Her hand shook. She didn't know what she was asking for: help, maybe support, but not love. That word had lost its weight long ago. Still, she dialed the number etched into her memory. She hadn't called him once, but now she had reached the edge of herself. The exhaustion wasn't just in her body, it hollowed her from the inside out. The phone rang. She expected silence, maybe voicemail, but he answered. His voice was exactly the same, low, sharp, focused. He said her name like it was a ghost. Before he could ask questions, she spoke. "I'm in the hospital. We need to talk." Then she hung up, closed her eyes, and waited. The echo of footsteps arrived before he did. Cole Hatcher walked with his familiar, deliberate stride, dressed in a navy suit as though he had just stepped out of a meeting. His hair perfectly styled, his face unreadable except for his eyes, scanning every number until they landed on hers. At the threshold of her room, he froze. Not because he doubted he was in the right place, but because what he saw stole his breath. Alexandra was unrecognizable. She looked so fragile, almost breakable beneath the hospital blanket. Her blonde hair limp against the pillow, her skin pale and worn from battle. Still, her gaze met his calm, stripped of fear or apology, carrying only exhaustion. On the small bedside table sat a folded blanket, half-empty water bottle, and a photo. His eyes caught on it, drawn like a magnet. Then, in the silence, a sound pierced the air, a soft coo. Cole turned toward it slowly. In the bassinet beside Alexandra's bed lay a tiny baby. His skin still soft with youth, dark curls brushing his temples, and tiny fists drifting lazily in the air. Logan blinked up at the ceiling and released a small yawn, a sound so delicate it seemed impossible to carry so much meaning. Cole stared as if he had never truly seen a baby before. In truth, he hadn't, not like this. He stepped inside slowly, careful, almost as though any sudden movement would break the spell. His voice came out rougher, lower than usual. "Is he?" Alexandra gave a single nod, no words, no expression, just confirmation. And that one nod unraveled something deep inside Cole he hadn't realized was wound so tight. He didn't sit, didn't speak right away. He just stood there, trying to process what his eyes couldn't deny. The baby looked like him. Same dark hair, the exact piercing blue eyes he faced every morning in the mirror. "How old is he?" Cole finally asked, barely above a whisper. 3 months, Alexandra murmured, her head resting back against the pillow. His name is Logan. Cole repeated the name under his breath, like it was foreign yet instantly precious. Logan, 3 months, which meant he'd been born not long after Alexandra had disappeared. His mind raced with timelines questions. Guilt. How had he not noticed she was pregnant? Why had she vanished without a word? And worst of all, how had she endured all of this, completely alone? Why didn't you tell me? He asked, her eyes closed briefly. Because I didn't know if you'd care. You made yourself clear about children, about not wanting a family. I didn't want them then, Cole admitted carefully. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't have stepped up if I had known. Her faint smile was sharp, almost bitter. Would you have? He didn't answer, because the truth was he wasn't sure. He had spent years building walls around himself, devoting everything to work, ambition, control. He had shut out emotions as if they were threats. Vulnerability, unpredictability, he had no room for them. A child would have terrified him. And yet, here he was, standing before a boy who shared his blood, who hadn't asked to be hidden in silence. I almost died, Cole, Alexandra whispered, her voice trembling now. I lost so much blood they had to operate twice. I couldn't walk for weeks. I had no one, no family, no friends who stayed. Just him. Every night I lay here wondering if I made the right choice. That crushed him more than anything. The image of her suffering alone while he sat in his penthouse office, oblivious it, broke through all the armor he had built. He stepped closer to the bassinet, gazing down at Logan, who had drifted into sleep. His tiny lips parted in peace. Maybe I didn't deserve to know, Cole said quietly, but I'm here now, and I want to be part of his life if you'll let me. Alexandra studied him long and hard, searching his face for lies, ego, anything false. But all she saw was raw truth. He was shaken, unprepared, but deeply moved. I didn't call because I needed help, she said softly. I called because I'm exhausted, because someone besides me needed to know he exists. That's enough, Cole replied. You shouldn't have carried this alone. She hesitated, then nodded toward the sink. Wash your hands, then you can hold him. Cole didn't argue. He scrubbed his hands like he was preparing for surgery, dried them quickly, and returned, awkward but careful. Alexandra guided him as he lifted Logan for the first time. The baby stirred, blinking once before nestling into Cole's chest. Everything stopped. He had signed million-dollar contracts, led empires, commanded boardrooms, but nothing had ever made his hands tremble like this. For the first time in years, the world didn't need to be conquered. It just needed to be held. Alexandra watched, something easing in her chest, though she didn't dare admit it. He was here. It didn't erase the past, but it just might change the future. The next morning carried a rhythm Cole hadn't known in years. He arrived at the hospital earlier than expected. No flowers, no assistant, no phone pressed to his ear. He told no one where he was going. The world of billion-dollar deals could wait. Something had shifted the moment Logan rested against his chest. He hadn't recognized it then, but now he knew it was a door opening in a place he'd spent his whole life locking shut. When he entered, Alexandra was upright in bed, eyes tired but clear. Logan squirmed in the bassinet beside her. Cole gave a small nod, uncertain if he was welcome or simply tolerated. He wasn't used to uncertainty in business. Everything had order, structure, but here, with a baby's soft breathing filling the silence, he was on foreign ground. You're early, Alexandra said quietly. I couldn't sleep, Cole admitted, placing coffee on the table and handing another to her. I've never held a baby before yesterday. You seemed calm, she replied, surprised. I was pretending. I thought I'd drop him, or break him. You didn't. The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was cautious, filled with unspoken questions and a fragile thread of peace. Cole sat in the chair near her bed, close but not intrusive. He looked at Logan, then back at Alexandra. For the first time, she saw sincerity in him, not the polished, rehearsed empathy of a businessman, but real vulnerability. I owe you the truth, she said suddenly. Her voice was soft but firm. About why I left the way I did. He stayed quiet, giving her space. His eyes stayed locked on hers, waiting. When I found out I was pregnant, I wasn't scared of being a mother. I was scared of being one in your world. You told me children get in the way of purpose. You said you never wanted to become your father, cold, distant, always gone. And I believed you. I believed that if I told you, you'd shut me out before I even had the chance to explain. So I left first. Cole didn't argue, didn't deflect, he simply nodded. That's fair. I said those things I meant it back then, Cole admitted, voice low, but hearing you repeat those words now it hurts. I didn't realize what I was pushing away until it was already gone. Alexandra's gaze dropped. I didn't want Logan to grow up with resentment hovering over him. I didn't want you to show up only out of guilt or obligation. I needed to prove to myself that I could do it without you. And you have, Cole said softly. You endured something that could have broken anyone. You've given him strength every day. Her voice cracked. I didn't want to do it alone, but I had no choice. Cole swallowed hard, guilt pressing against his chest. I can't change the past. I can't erase the pain, but I want to try, not for redemption. Not because I deserve forgiveness, but because I want to be his father. In whatever way you'll allow. Her fingers tightened around the warm cup in her hands. I don't know what that looks like yet. Neither do I, he admitted, but I'm here, and I'll keep coming back until we figure it out. The room settled into quiet, broken only by the soft rhythm of Logan's breathing. It wasn't reconciliation. Not yet. It wasn't an ending or a beginning, it was something else. An opening. Later, when a nurse entered to check vitals and feeding logs, Cole rose to give space. But before he could step out, Alexandra's voice stopped him. Do you want to help with his bottle? For a moment, Cole froze, then nodded. Yes, I do. She guided him, carefully measuring, mixing, testing the temperature. His confident hands fumbled, awkward with something so small. Yet he listened, asked questions, didn't rush. When Logan drank quietly in his arms, tiny fingers clinging to his shirt, Alexandra felt something shift. This wasn't the man who once dismissed the idea of family. This was someone else, someone learning, someone present. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but the fragile start of it. The days that followed carried a delicate tension. Like standing at the edge of a cliff, not knowing which way the wind would blow. Cole kept coming, not with grand gestures or desperate apologies, but with steady presence. He arrived early, brought her coffee exactly the way she liked it, and held Logan with a tenderness that unsettled and comforted her all at once. He didn't ask to stay overnight. He didn't intrude. He offered help when she needed it and silence when she didn't. Yet, beneath the surface, questions swelled on both sides. Alexandra avoided them. Her body still fragile, her mind still raw from months of isolation. She was simply too tired. On the fourth morning, sunlight spilled through the cracked hospital window. Alexandra sat in a wheelchair by the glass, Logan asleep against her chest, his tiny breaths syncing with hers. When Cole entered, she only nodded toward the empty chair beside her. You look stronger today, he said gently. I feel stronger, she admitted, though her voice carried exhaustion. He leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees. Did the doctors say when you'll be discharged? Maybe a week. They're monitoring for internal bleeding or infection. The surgeries took more than they expected. He nodded slowly. And where will you go? Her heart skipped. She hadn't let herself think that far. Her apartment was cramped, barely space for a crib, and nowhere near ready for recovery. She had no family, no safety net. Her only plan had been survival, one day at a time. I don't know yet, she confessed, but I'll manage. You don't have to manage alone, he said quietly. Come home with me. She turned sharply, guarded. Your penthouse isn't exactly baby-friendly. I've already started converting the guest room, he replied, surprising her. Cribs built, changing tables on the way. I've read more about baby care in the last 3 days than I ever did about finance. You think that makes you ready? No, he answered without hesitation, but I want to be. I'm not trying to win you back, Alexandra. I just want to give him what I never had, a father who shows up. His words landed deep. She had always known the story of his father. Powerful, absent, withholding even the simplest. I'm proud of you. Maybe that was why Cole had convinced himself families were burdens. Maybe his armor had been so thick it took losing everything to realize he'd trapped himself inside it. And me? She asked softly. Where do I fit in your plan? You're his mother, and you're someone I hurt. If being near me only hurts more, I'll step aside. But if there's any way I can help while you recover, I will. No strings, no expectations. Her silence stretched. She remembered the nights she cried alone, the weight of trying not to break, the fear that Logan would grow up fatherless. I don't want to live in your world, she whispered. I don't want to feel like a guest in your life. You wouldn't be, he said firmly. I don't want to be a part-time visitor in my own son's story. I want to build something for all three of us. Her eyes dropped to Logan's tiny face, peaceful, unaware of the choices shaping his future. I'll come, she said at last, surprising even herself. Just until I'm stronger. After that, we'll see. Cole didn't celebrate. He didn't push. He only nodded. understanding the gravity of her words. The next day he brought a car seat. The day after, baby clothes and recovery supplies. Each time, he asked for nothing in return. Alexandra's doubts lingered, but she couldn't ignore what she saw. Effort. Quiet, consistent, real effort. It wasn't love reborn. It wasn't a fairy tale. But it was the start of rebuilding something from ruins. And sometimes that was more powerful than beginning brand new. Moving into Cole's world wasn't what Alexandra imagined. She had pictured cold marble, sterile walls, silence thick enough to suffocate. But when the elevator doors slid open to the penthouse, she stopped in surprise. It was still sleek, still luxurious but different. Softer rugs lined the living room. Corners were padded with baby-proof foam. A crib stood near the floor-to-ceiling window with a mobile spinning gently above it. Diapers and bottles stacked neatly along one wall. Golden sunlight streamed across it all, making the space feel less like a fortress and more like a home. Cole stepped in behind her with a bag over his shoulder, silent, giving her time to take it in. She shifted Logan in her arms, stunned by the care threaded into every detail. Logan stirred slightly, but didn't wake, and for the first time, Alexandra wondered if maybe just maybe he meant every word. Alexandra moved slowly across the open space, stopping at the crib. Her hand brushed one of the tiny onesies folded neatly on the changing table. They were the perfect size. Every detail was. "You arranged all of this?" she finally asked, her gaze still fixed on the fabric. "I had some guidance from a consultant," Cole admitted. "I didn't know where to begin, but I wanted you both to feel safe here." The image of Cole seeking advice from a baby expert nearly pulled a smile from her. Though she kept her expression still, the effort wasn't small. It was overwhelming, and it unsettled her how much she wanted to believe his intentions were real. He led her into the guest suite, remodeled, expanded, entirely hers. A nursery for Logan connected to her room by a sliding door. Clearly he had envisioned more than a short stay, but he left the thought unspoken. He didn't pressure her to name what it meant. When she asked about his room, he simply said it was down the hall. He gave her distance not only in space, but where it mattered most emotionally. He didn't push. He didn't pretend they were suddenly a family. He didn't act like the past had been erased. And that restraint mattered more than any grand gesture. The first night felt strange. Logan's cries pierced the quiet at 2 a.m., and Alexandra woke instantly, her body frail but driven by instinct. As she fumbled with the formula in the half-light, Cole appeared in the doorway, barefoot in sweats and a plain black t-shirt. She expected him to hover, maybe offer to help. Instead, he quietly picked up the bottle pieces she had dropped, fitted them together, and handed the bottle to her without a word before stepping back. "Thanks," she murmured, holding Logan against her chest. Cole gave a brief nod. "I set up a white noise machine, supposed to help him sleep longer?" She glanced at the corner where it hummed softly. "You've been reading a lot." "I'm trying to understand," he said. Simply. Not just Logan, not just parenting, everything. It was the closest he had come to admitting regret. She didn't push him further. Days fell into an uneasy rhythm. Mornings began with coffee and baby wipes. Afternoons blurred with naps and feedings. Evenings often passed in silence. Logan nestled on the playmat between them while Alexandra read and Cole typed emails, careful not to let work intrude. Small, surprising moments softened the edge-shared laughter when Logan sneezed 5 times in a row. A glance of understanding when one of them soothed him faster than the other. But there were sharp edges to her snapping in exhaustion, his instinct to take control as if life were a corporate strategy. She reminded him sharply, this wasn't business, this was life. And slowly, he adjusted. One night, after a brutal day of Logan refusing to nap and Alexandra nearly breaking under the weight of it, she found Cole in the kitchen, actually cooking. Vegetables sizzled in a pan, real spices filling the air. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You cook now?" she asked, half sarcasm, half disbelief. "I've learned," he said without looking up. "You haven't been eating much. I figured I'd try something better than takeout." She didn't respond, but she stayed. She sat at the island, watching as he plated the food. When he placed it in front of her, she stared at it like it was more than dinner. A truce. A peace offering, maybe both. She took a bite. "You're different," she said quietly. "So are you," he answered without missing a beat. "Not just because of the baby. No," he said, his voice steady, "because you faced it all alone, and you survived." She didn't know whether to thank him or cry, so she kept eating. Later, lying in bed while Logan breathed steadily in the bassinet beside her, she realized how strange life was. The man who once felt like a stranger in their relationship was slowly becoming someone she didn't mind sharing space with. She didn't trust it fully. Not yet, but there was something forming, something real. Cole was not a man accustomed to slowing down. His life had been a collection of deadlines and power plays, every second accounted for. But a newborn unraveled that order. It wasn't just sleepless nights, it was vulnerability. The intensity of needing to be present when nothing else worked. For the first time, he couldn't fix problems with money or strategy. If Logan cried, he had to learn the meaning behind each sound. If Alexandra fell silent, he had to sit with it instead of trying to solve it. 2 weeks passed since Alexandra and Logan had moved in. The nights were still fractured, but Cole was adapting. He began recognizing Logan's cues: clenched fists before hunger, the soft whimper that meant he wanted comfort, the small sigh that came before sleep. He even downloaded an app to track every detail. Alexandra teased him for treating Logan like a quarterly report, but she let him do it. Because he was trying. Their history remained unspoken, the heavier conversations avoided. Alexandra rarely mentioned the pregnancy or the lonely hospital nights, and she never asked where Cole's heart had been during those months. Maybe she didn't want to know, but she couldn't ignore the changes she saw. The way his hands softened when he touched Logan's head, the patience when he listened to her without correction, the steadiness when she expected him to drift away. One rainy afternoon, while Logan napped, Alexandra sat curled on the sofa with a sketch pad. She hadn't drawn in months. Her hand moved slowly, tracing Logan's features. Cole watched from the kitchen, careful not to disturb her. She looked different when she sketched, fragile, yes, but peaceful. For the first time, she wasn't forcing herself to be strong. She simply was. Eventually, he sat beside her. "You're really talented. I used to do this all the time," she said, not lifting her eyes. "Stopped when I was too tired to hold a pencil." "Why didn't I know this about you?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Because we never talked about anything real." The words landed heavy. He didn't defend himself. He didn't try to rewrite their past. He only nodded, because she was right. That evening, when Logan refused to sleep despite everything, Alexandra handed him to Cole in frustration. "Your turn. He doesn't want me right now." Cole took him gently, walking through the apartment, murmuring softly. He talked about the skyline, the rain, the night he first met Alexandra. How terrified he'd been that someone like her could love someone like him. Slowly, Logan settled in his arms. Cole didn't stop. He told stories of his childhood, ones he had never spoken aloud. When Alexandra appeared behind him, listening quietly, her voice was soft. "He knows your voice now." Cole looked down at the baby, then at her. "I didn't think I'd be good at this." "You're not perfect," she whispered, "but neither am I." That night, for the first time, she asked him to stay in the nursery, not as her partner, as a father. Two parents, side by side, keeping watch over the child that bound them. The walls of history and hurt still stood, but in that room existed something else: respect, presence, the fragile beginnings of something new. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but its first fragile spark, glimmering in the dark. Before she could take a step, Cole was already moving, already inside the nursery. From the doorway, she watched as he lifted their son into his arms, whispering something too soft for her to catch. Almost instantly, Logan stilled, his tiny body molding into the curve of Cole's shoulder. She leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, her chest heavy with a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to embrace in so long: safety, not just for her, but for her child. After all the scars and chaos that had led them here, there was something sacred in the quiet scene before her. The man she once doubted could ever understand love was now swaying gently with their son. In the soft glow of a nursery he had built with his own hands. Maybe love wasn't grand gestures or thunderous confessions. Maybe it lived in moments like this. Quiet, steady, earned days became weeks. Weeks turned into months, and what had begun as a necessity slowly grew into something more complicated. Something harder to define. Logan was nearly 6 months old, now a round, bright-eyed baby, who laughed easily and rarely cried. His favorite place was still someone's arms, and more often than not, those arms belonged to Cole. Alexandra's chest tightened each time she saw her son reach for him. With such natural trust, Logan didn't just recognize Cole. He believed in him, and, slowly, she began to as well. Their lives found a rhythm. Not a flawless, picture-perfect rhythm people brag about online, but a raw, lived-in normal. Some mornings spun into chaos, filled with spilled formula, late calls, and unanswered emails. Other days passed in a stillness where nothing needed to be said at all. Bit by bit, Alexandra opened herself to him not just as Logan's mother, but as herself. She shared her drawings, her memories, her fears. In return, Cole revealed pieces of himself no one else had ever seen. He spoke about his mother leaving when he was 7, the crushing weight of expectation, and how he had long mistaken vulnerability for weakness. But holding his son had shattered that illusion faster and more completely than anything else in his life. One quiet evening, they sat together in the living room. Logan slept down the hall, and the apartment was wrapped in a hush that felt heavier than usual, as if waiting for words that mattered. Alexandra, in leggings and a sweater, hair twisted loosely, her face bare and softened by exhaustion, looked more herself than she ever had. Cole sat across from her, barefoot, sleeves rolled, his collar loosened. He looked less like the polished CEO and more like a man who had finally found where he belonged. She broke the silence first. "You've changed." His brow lifted. "For the better," she added softly. "For the real." He gave her the smallest smile. "I didn't know what I was missing. I thought I had everything, but it was all just noise. You and Logan. This is quiet, and it's the only thing that feels like peace." Her throat tightened, not with fear, but with the weight of emotions her heart was still catching up to. She had never imagined she would feel this again, certainly not with him. "I don't know what comes next," she admitted. "I'm still figuring out who I am." "So am I," he said, "but I know what I want." He rose, walked to the cabinet, and from a drawer pulled out a small, gray box, simple, unadorned, nothing like a traditional ring case. Returning to her, he set it gently in her hand. Her breath caught, but she didn't open it right away. "This isn't a proposal," he said. "It's a promise. That I'm not leaving. That I'll show up every day. That you'll never have to wonder if I'm all in." She slowly lifted the lid. Inside lay a delicate gold chain with a tiny charm, Logan's birthstone on one side, and engraved on the other. "The day we became 3. Her eyes burned with tears before she could stop them. She wasn't someone who cried icily anymore, but the quiet sincerity of the gesture tore through every wall she'd built. "I don't need a fairy tale," she whispered. "I'm not offering one," he replied. "Just us. As we are. No performances. No empty promises." She leaned in, pressed her forehead against his. "Then yes." They stayed there, in silence, letting the moment breathe. No need to label it further. Later that night, after placing the necklace on her dresser, Alexandra peeked into Logan's room. He stirred briefly, then settled back into sleep. She lingered at his crib before turning off the light and returning to the living room. Cole was still there, waiting, not demanding more than she was ready to give. And in that quiet stillness, surrounded by a life they had never planned but slowly chose, she understood they weren't just repairing the past. They were creating something new, something shaped by pain, molded through growth, and rooted in the one thing they had once believed impossible. Home. The strength of this story lives in its raw honesty, the slow, unpolished redemption, not in sweeping gestures or instant forgiveness. Cole's change isn't perfect. It's gradual, flawed, human. He didn't come back to fix her. He came back to grow into who he should have always been. Alexandra's journey is no less powerful. She doesn't lose herself in old love. She stands firm in her boundaries, her scars, her progress. She lets him in not because she needs saving, but because she sees the man he has become, because she is ready. That choice is what makes her strong. The ending works because it doesn't erase the past. It honors it. It proves healing doesn't always mean returning to what was. It means building something new out of what remains. No perfection, just two people, fighting for peace, for family, for love that once seemed lost. And that makes the ending not just moving but earned.